And welcome back to Sunday Square Off and the week that was at the Arizona Capitol. The bills you may have missed. Two controversial pieces of legislation got their first hearings. Let's start with the anti-vaxxers, opponents of childhood immunizations. They're backing a package of Republican bills that would create new exemptions from vaccinations and could further depress the dangerously low measles immunization rate in Maricopa County. One vaccination opponent had this dire warning about a loss of religious freedom.
When a sect of people are vilified and marginalized over a belief system and then forced into medical procedures, in this case mandated vaccinations, that is the definition of totalitarianism.
Now, these bills are opposed by Arizona's major medical associations and health insurers and the state's largest business group. A House committee approved the anti-vaccination package of 3 bills on party line votes. The next step, a vote in the full House. Senate approval is also needed. Next up, a committee hearing on an abortion bill that the Democratic sponsor didn't want to have, but for Republicans, the hearing was political gold. Here's the backstory. Democratic State Representative Raquel Terán sponsored a bill to revise an Arizona abortion law. After she filed it, she says, she realized the bill language went far beyond what she wanted and would have erased a 40-year-old state law against abortion. Republicans noticed that too. They claim the bill would allow for the killing of newborns. So when a Democratic committee member asked to withdraw the bill, Republicans said no.
It is a common courtesy to honor the wishes of a sponsor of a bill, to hold a bill when that's requested.
It is apparent that there are members of this committee that will do everything they can to subvert a discussion of this bill.
The hearing proceeded. The Democratic abortion bill that Democrats asked to withdraw was voted down, and Republicans got talking points about Democrats who allegedly want to kill babies. And one more vote from last week, or non-vote, the push for an equal rights amendment is dead. In the Arizona House, Republican Speaker Rusty Bowers never assigned the bill to a committee, and in the Senate, Republican Committee Chair Eddie Farnsworth wouldn't give it a hearing. And time is up to hear new bills. And that's the week that was at our Capitol.